Dan Ganane calling it beautifully. It was the Panthers 36 over the Eels 34. 3 tries, he says, in just 2 minutes. A remarkable finish to that game, Ryan Girdler.
Just incredible. I mean, you get the feeling sometimes that Penrith are just looking to find different ways to win games of footy. They've done that a couple of times this year. Sure, by their own standards, they weren't great in patches of that game, and take nothing away from the Eels, who I thought have been exceptional for the last couple of weeks. I've played in a fair few of those derbies, Tone, and regardless of where the team's sitting on the table, there's always something there, especially, when there's a big crowd there and there's, Parramatta have got an opportunity there just to, on the back of a little bit of momentum, sort of upset the apple cart. And they did really well. But, yeah, Penrith, probably didn't play to the usual standard, especially in parts of that second half. But there must have been 3 or 4 times through that contest where I sat there and went, oh, well, it's over now. Yep. Like, because you never give up on Penrith, like you always believe that they can find a way. But even last night, there was that Gutherson try in the 71st minute. It was like, well, certainly now 14 points down. Dan called it. Martin in the bin. It's certainly over now. They've locked it up, and then just incredible. That side, I mean, never give up, never stop. Just don't upset their rhythm. Stay calm, stay composed, and just can execute at that level in those moments. Just tells you what sort of club they are.
They're sort of never say die specialists of the NRL. You go back to the grand final last year, they were in an impossible position. Only Cleary got him out in that magical 17-minute spell, and last night, 74th minute, 76th minute, 77th minute. As you said, when Gutho scored, game over.
Yeah.
And I just watched it back this morning and couldn't believe it. And look, Parramatta didn't give up, but they sort of put their game away and just went into defensive mode. And you've seen that happen with teams. They just go off their natural football. And against a side like Penrith, they just capitalise. They're outstanding. And, can't wait for the Melbourne game next weekend.
I'm not too sure Parramatta did that as too much, Buzz, because Penrith started throwing the ball around. As soon as they scored that try, and to get them within 10, I think it was, those next 2 sets, they went from sideline to sideline. They played such an expansive style of footy. It probably poses a question. Sometimes they play a little bit too safe, Penrith, and just back themselves defensively. But in this instance, they 14 points down, 7 to go. It would have been tough to defend for Parramatta because they were moving the footy so well, made it so hard. Like they were going from one sideline to the other sideline. Cleary was sitting in the 4s, really testing those 3 and the 2-man. And Blaze Talangi tried to get up at the end, but his winger didn't come with him, and it just created that space, and off they went. So, but yeah, Parramatta would be disappointed that they leaked 3 tries in 7 minutes.
Would the coach be disappointed from the Panthers? Obviously, they got that job done, but the 34 points against.
Yeah, I think Cleary's obviously, big on them defending their goal line better than they have. But at the same time, he's got to sit back and just admire what his team does. What they're able to do. There's no more superlatives you can add to them. Every time we think, they'll start to drop off, they find a way with 14 down to score 3 tries in 7 minutes. I was sitting in a leagues club watching it, and just Parramatta supporters are looking at me, and I'm like, well, what? It's not unusual anymore, is it? It's like, all right, yeah.
But the thing is, JD, you got to have calm heads in situations like that. And Cleary spoke about it after the game, and teams can panic, and you're giving them a rap for spreading the football. But when you spread the footy under pressure, you can make errors, and they didn't. And outstanding win.
Yeah, all their big plays in those big moments, like Toto on a couple of occasions, like he diffused that bomb at the final sort of siren, and then, got out of the in-goal on a couple of occasions. I mean, they own those moments at the back end of the game, and you could just feel, even though you're right, JD, like Parramatta didn't really do anything to lose it, you could just feel that they started feeling Penrith the momentum, and they're starting to tighten up just a little bit, because that that Arcee run down that left side for the Gutho try was never on. I thought that was a brave play, like they should have been kicking to the corner defending their lead, and he decided to run it at halfway to, on that last play, Gutho ends up, it puts Lane through, Gutho back on the inside, should have sealed the contest for him. So they were still playing footy, but I just think that, Penrith have such a reputation. They have the players that everyone knows just find a way to get the job done, and that's what just made Parramatta that little bit nervous in the back end.
What leagues club are you watching at, JD?
It was Brighton Lakes Golf Club, actually.
Okay.
Some close family friends had a daughter had her 18th, so we went out there for a feed, and it's a great club out there at Moorebank Way. So it was good.
It's good when 18th includes watching Grammar Rugby League on the big screen.
Do you have it on the phone or the screen?
No, it was on 2 massive screens.
Oh, was it?
I was actually checking the score on my phone on the Swannies game. I was intrigued to see that. Yeah. I was just really interested to see how the Swannies bounce back this week against a strong Collingwood side as well. So from a sporting purist, I was looking forward to that.
They took their time to bounce back, let me tell you. As somebody who was there, down 27 points in the final quarter before they got 5 goals in a row to do that job.
Yeah, well, I actually thought they lost. Yeah, because I checked it, it must have been early in the fourth quarter, and they were getting pumped. And I thought, oh, wow, because it was 44-41 at half time, and then it's oh, well, that's it. And then I checked the phone, I said, no way, they won.
And Panthers did the same thing coming back against Seals. Now, there was a little bit of controversy about that final try, Buzz.
Yeah, I've had a look at it a couple of times, and look, it was a really, really tight call, and JD's sort of disagreeing, but he's had a look at it too. I did think it was an obstruction play by Liam Martin, albeit it was he might have tripped over another Parramatta and then gone into a Neils defender who was coming across to try and make a tackle. I've seen tries like that taken off teams this year. And all I want is consistency, and Trent Barrett blew up after the game bad. I think we're going to hear that in a while.
Well, let's have a listen to that right now. He and Gutho are talking about that.
The last try, I thought there was an obstruction in there, pretty bad one too. How that happens with the officiating that we've got and how many people are looking at it, I don't know. Dejan Arcee got knocked over by Liam, and that shouldn't have been a try. And sometimes it happens when you're
not liked.
Yeah, I wouldn't say not like, but when you're not supposed to be winning, and Penrith are the premiers, and everyone, maybe they were a bit surprised that we were in the contest, and you don't get them. And we didn't get a couple of them tonight. There was a few, but the last one's hard to call. Yeah, you just can't do that, and you see that every other week. You'll see a few of them on the weekend, and they'll get pulled up, and that cost us the game. And hardest thing now is just to get them back up, and got the Roosters next week, so it doesn't get any easier.
Trent Barrett there, and it might have been with us, an addition of Gutho with the not liked.
I think he's in a bit of trouble. The NRL don't mind them talking about referees, but when you start to question integrity and when you say you're not liked, or he actually withdrew that, so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there, but he said, look, we were not supposed to win. That's when you're getting into an area that he's challenging referee integrity. And I've spoken to Andrew Abdo this morning, Graham Annesley. They're thinking about over the weekend. Best case scenario for Baz is a warning letter. Could be a fine. Obviously a tough press conference, JD.
Yeah. It's been a tough back end of the year for Baz, hasn't it? But he would be really happy with what he saw from his team, especially over in New Zealand, and then backing that up against Penrith. But yeah, I just think Blaise Talangi's involvement is the reason why it's not given. I think he's up ahead of the line. He comes in quite a way and clips Martin, which he then falls into Dejan Arcee. I think if he holds his line and the fullback goes in between the two defenders, there's no doubt that that's obstruction. But you could argue that he didn't get a chance to get back and cover and make the tackle, so that definitely was taken away from him. So I can understand both sides of it, and I would understand it if it went either. If that's a grand final and that's disallowed, I reckon there'd be more uproar than if it was allowed. That's just how I see it, but I think that's what the referees are looking at. They're looking at a defensive decision, and Blaise Talangi makes an ordinary run in that position, and whether it's right, he clips him or not, is not what they're looking at, I don't think.
JD, what were you like in terms of walking that very thin line when you were a coach and talking to the media afterwards, where you're concerned about a decision?
Did you ever get fined?
No.
Never.
Yeah, I'm not big on talking about referees' decisions. I think when you leak 36 points, it's easy to point it at one decision. I think you lose a game 6-0, you can probably blow up at a decision, but 3 tries in 7 minutes. There's some things in there as a footy coach that your team can do to avoid that.
Yep.
And that's probably would be my biggest focus. And it would hurt though. The hardest thing about press conferences, we're emotional creatures, coaches, and we ride the highs and lows. And you go out, and then you've got 5-10 minutes to walk in and sit in a press conference, and your media man will rattle off a couple of potential questions, and you're barely listening to him half the time. He's just walking in there, rethinking all the things that went on in the game, and I can see the argument. I can see where it's coming from, but I think it's pretty dangerous ground to be talking about favouritism to top sides and bottom sides. I think that does sort of cross the line a little bit, although Baz did backtrack from that.
Yeah. Ryan Girdler, the Eels did have a chance, though, even post that try. Didn't they? Gutho had that kick to send it to Golden Point. Didn't really get the job done.
Well, Gutho kicked through from the sideline. It was draining them from everywhere all night. And then, the most important one, obviously, was very gettable in any sort of goal kicker's scope. And we know he's not a regular goal kicker, but from memory, he's had a couple from that sort of same position throughout the year that he's also hasn't hit that well. So maybe it would have been. I mean, you're the leader. I understand it. He's the captain. He's always going to back himself. You're fighting the demons. If you've got a bad spot as a goal kicker, sometimes you just go through periods of the season where you're hitting them wrong from a certain point. You might be hitting them well from everywhere, and you get one from that spot again. You're like, oh shit, here I go, and then they come in. And then sometimes you feel like saying, especially if it's an important one. There's only one way to get through it. That, and that is by starting to nail them from there. But if the game's on the line and you're not hitting them well from a certain spot, the thought does enter the mind to throw them to someone else who's hitting them okay, and just to, because they're not fighting the same demons. And I wonder whether that went through Gutho's mind. But God, he shanked it. Gee, he hit it bad.
Shocking,
Poor guy.
I can see why he wants to focus on the instruction.
The other thing, boys, and I'm just looking at the stats in that game, Baz blowing up about not getting a fair go. They won the penalty count 9-3.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's pretty handy, swing there.
Yeah,
So.
that's a good stat. Well, the other good stat is the game that now is ahead Thursday night when they take on Melbourne, and with that minor premiership still in play. That will be brilliant. Look forward to seeing that. Early tip from you.
Yeah, I'm going to back Penrith. I'm interested to see how Melbourne approach the game. I think I talk about it a bit, they're quite negative how they defend between the 30s in terms of conceding metres, and I think you do that against a Penrith side. In Penrith, you're going to be coming off your own try line a lot of the time, so I'm interested to see how Melbourne maybe try to change that up a little bit and go after Penrith, but everybody's sort of expected Melbourne to fall, but they've got such a great footy side, haven't they? And I don't think they were great on Thursday night, so I think they had one eye on what's coming up next week, and we saw what they did against the Roosters a few weeks ago, so I'm expecting them to raise the bar again next week.
NRL 360 has been talking all week about the fact that Mitchell is keen to ask for release and look elsewhere. I've spoken to his manager a number of times this week. I can't get a guarantee, surprisingly, off Isaac Moses that he will see out the last 2 years of his contract. And I've gone into more detail in that in my column tomorrow. It's a really, really interesting story. It was one of these ridiculous contracts. It was supposed to be long-term, but it had the 2-year clause in it that allows him at the end of 26 to leave if he wants. But as you said, Hoops has linked him to the Sydney Roosters. I'm not sure that part of the story is true. They're desperately trying to lock up Sam Walker long-term. They see him as their halfback for up to the next 10 years. Nick Politis is away. He'll be back soon. He does not deal with Isaac Moses over the Swali. He transferred to rugby union. He insists he will never, ever do another deal with him. So as for Moses, I'm not so sure about the Roosters, whether he's unsettled or not. His agent was given the opportunity to put the story to bed and hasn't. So
It's odd, isn't it? Though I mean, he did come out publicly and say that Trent Barrett was, the guy in terms of coaching for next year. But he signed that deal. He went on, played and starred in the back end of Origin. Where's the unsettled nature? I mean, has he's spoken to Jason Riles, obviously?
Yeah, he has. And you speak to anyone at Parramatta like Jimmy Sarantinos, their chief executive, he insists that Mitchell is okay, that he's met with Jason Riles, that the story is not a story. But while there's silence from his own camp, that's what worries me. And I don't know why. And I spoke to Jim Sarantinos during the week and I said, mate, put Mitchell up. Let him talk to the media. Let this story go away. You've had a horrific off-field with all those great juniors leaving. I said, you need a positive story. Put him up just for 2 minutes with the media. Let him tell the world that he wants to be a Parramatta Eel, that he's proud to be a Parramatta Eel. But there's silence. There's nothing.
But there has been from the top saying that there is no problem and he will see out the contract from
Yeah,
within
but they
Parramatta.
also said they were going to keep Blaze Talaga and Matt, how many times we got to talk about Parramatta and their lack of footy in the, in that department. So I'm still suspicious while they're remaining so quiet.
Yeah, well, it feels like to me, Buzz, that, they're just going to wait. It's going to be a performance-based decision. There's, the fact that it's already in the contract, Mitchell Moses or his manager don't really need to come out and say anything at this point and commit to anyone. I think they're probably just going to wait and see the impact that Riles has when he comes in, what recruitment retention looks like. Obviously, Mitch, high on his list now, is trying to play finals and win a premiership, and I guess he's now got the option, it's been written into his contract, that if Parramatta aren't the club to allow him to do that in the back end of his career, well, as of next year, or the back end of next year, he's going to be able to potentially go to a club that has. So he's probably sitting in a pretty good spot at the moment, Mitch. I'm sure he'd like to stay at Parramatta. I'm sure that he'd like to come out and tell all the fans that that's where he's going to remain. But the fact that there's that clause in his contract just allows him to sit there, be silent, and just see what unfolds in front of him.
I think it's interesting as well that it's for the end of 26 he's contracted to. Is that right?
Yes.
So November 1's an important deadline then.
Yep.
Date for him,
Yep.
I would think. So, as Gerd says, maybe it is just sitting back and having a look at what plays out. The season's over anyway, but yeah, it'll continue to go on until he comes out and says, "Yeah, no, I'm in here." But he's contracted, so the contract says he's in. And
I just thought it might have been helpful for the club to get him publicly on board. And the problem for the Eels long term, even if he does stay the next 2 years, is these 3 new NRL franchises who are going to be looking for playmakers, champion playmakers, and they'll be offering ridiculous money for someone like Mitchell Moses. And I don't think in 2 or 3 years' time that he would be in a position, what we saw in Origin and what we know he could be a $1.6 million player under, with one of these new sides.
I think one of the other things, Buzz, that we need to take into consideration is the fact that they're trying to rebuild. They've got a new coach coming in Parramatta, and until their star half isn't committed, how can they recruit anyone? Who's going to want to go and play there when they don't know who's going to be in that spot? And then they also know that it's been pretty public that, I think Dylan Brown's got a clause in his contract as well. So you got your 2 main men at that club that's trying to go through a rebuilding phase, recruit the right sort of people, and no one knows, how committed their 2 main players are. I mean, those decisions by administration are going to have a big impact on their next couple of years, Tone.
No, that's true. But don't they know how committed they are because he signed a contract? He signed a contract.
With a clause.
Yeah, with the clause.
With the clause, yeah. Well, he's committed while that contract's valid, Tony, of course.
Yeah, but
it's like that, isn't it? I'm getting married and, I'm all in, but I'll just have this little clause
if I meet someone nicer.
a couple of years.
But why
I
don't
just
they...
don't get clauses. I can't get my head around them. I've never entertained them as a coach at any level. Never would entertain them. I don't understand why, as a game, and I'm not talking about these individuals specifically, but as a game, if we're offering anything more than a 2-year deal, that's a long-term commitment from the club. So you would expect a long-term commitment from the player. And if the player says, I'm happy for to take the 5-year deal, what's to say over the last 2 years that Mitch or Dylan have had terrible seasons, are playing out of form, all sorts of different things going on in their lives, and they're still contracted for another 3 years. The club is still committed to pay that $1 million or $900,000, what it is, for that 3 years. They don't have a get-out clause. So I think Gerds is right. It's really, for me, from a club's perspective, it's really interesting that they've decided with so many players to have these clauses in there. And
it doesn't happen at the good clubs. Melbourne Storm don't do clauses. The Sydney Roosters rarely do clauses. And this is where I've been critical of Parramatta all along, the people who are running their football program, and it's just not right.
Well, what about the thing about him being disenfranchised or concerned? But he's aware. I mean, the Jason Ryles thing didn't come as a great shock or surprise to anybody, did it? I mean, he's been courted by a number of clubs and was always the next big thing coming through in terms of those coaches who were assistants. So it wouldn't have come as a shock to Mitch Moses that Jason Ryles has taken over, surely.
No, not at all. I think Jason Ryles has put his hand up to coach that club because of players like Mitchell Moses.
Yeah.
And it'd be great for Mitch to put his hand up and come out and say, you know what, I've got his back, because he's going to need him. There's no doubt, as a rookie coach coming in, those guys are going to be key to Ryles rebuilding what the culture in and around the way he wants it to look. So it's going to be really important. And I think Mitch, from what I've seen, will be that bloke. I think there's no doubt he will. Whether he's saying it right now or not, my personal opinion is I think Mitch will be all in. I think he'll respect the fact that Parramatta have done some great things for his career since he left the Tigers, and he'll be committed to trying to turn that around. At the same time, that because of what's gone on over the last 12, 18 months, there's just that little bit of doubt in everyone's mind in the organisation. So they're all just sitting back going, all right, let's just pull this together. But I'm sure in the near future, as Buzz says, Mitch will come out and say, no, I'm all in, let's do this.
Well, Jason Ryles just needs to make it that place, doesn't he, JD, where no one wants to leave, where everyone can see the direction, it's clear, they're having some success, they're building, everything's everyone's, rowing in the same direction. And therefore, it becomes a destination of a club. That's what every coach, I would imagine, would sign a contract with a club to try and get it to become. So he's got to take that confidence in there. Mitch has got to be part of that plan. But the only way Jason can assure with those sort of, clauses in contracts that those guys want to stay is by creating the right environment, and that's a winning one.
100%. And he's got a team with a few additions and a few little changes that he can do that. That's the beauty of the position they're in. They saw that. They beat the Warriors convincingly in New Zealand, and they took it to Penrith last night. So there's a footy team in there.
Definitely.
The problem with Parramatta's season is they've had some shockers, and it's great that they're coming home strong, the Warriors. You guys remember the Darwin game? It was arguably the worst performance I've ever seen from any Parramatta side. And then in Canberra, they were belted by nearly 40 a week or two after that. So I look back on the season as being pretty disastrous for a club that was supposed to be in top 8 contention and now down the bottom with the West Tigers just ahead of them. So it's great, JD, you're giving them a rap, but the whole season picture has been very, very disappointing.
Oh, there's no doubt about that, Buzz, but they can't look back now.
No.
They've accepted that as a club and as a board, and they've made decisions in and around that, and they're looking to make change because they're, as a club, not happy with where they sit. But at the same time, the players are going to take some ownership of where they sit. You can't just sit here and go, it's his fault. Otherwise, that's not going to change for anyone. It has to be some inward looking from every player and every staff member in there and go, okay, we want to be better, and this is where we're going to be. They'll be going through it with a fine-tooth comb in not just recruitment, in were they fit enough? What was their pre-season like? How was the depth of the squad when they got injuries? Because Mitch Moses' injury early in the season and for a long period of time had a massive impact on where they sat. So there's all those type of things that Ryles will be going through with a fine-tooth comb. But the beauty of he's got a blank piece of paper and he's able to start from scratch, bring the people in he wants, and I'm hearing Nathan Brown's coming into the club, which is a great signing. A guy who's been there, done that, has a close relationship with him, is an excellent coach in his own right, but understands the game on and off the field. And that's a sign that, Riles is thinking about what he needs. And I think that alone should get the Parramatta players a little bit excited.
Yeah. 44-0 over the Titans. That must make you feel a little bit chuffed.
Yeah, it does. I thought it was a statement win last night. I think a lot of critics, myself included, were doubting not their rights, but whether their team was a top four outfit against the Penrith, the
Storms.
the Storm and the Sydney Roosters. And they went up there as the outsiders to play the Titans, who had blown a number of teams off the park over the last 4 to 6 weeks. They were without Nico Hines and they were without Braden Trindle. They're two halves, and they smashed them, absolutely smashed them. And Craig Fitzgibbon's been, they opened the game with 30 points in 29 minutes. And they were really, really slick, and they produced some attacking football that us fans have been waiting to see for a long period of time. And, yeah, they could, they look like they might hang on for a top four now.
Yeah, I think there's been some good signs over the last few weeks, I think, for the Sharks. Like, they're starting to get their defensive resolve back. I could see that in the Rabbitohs game the week before, and it wasn't quite clicking in terms of their execution in attack. But William Kennedy coming back in definitely adds to that. And you got to give Fitzy a massive rap. Like, he's got no halves. His first choice halves aren't available. The Daniel Atkinson's come in and done a fantastic job, and you can see how much confidence Fitzy's put in him by how he comes out and just expresses himself on the field. He's not overthinking it. He's getting out there and he's enjoying his footy, and that's a credit to the coach who's giving him that confidence to go out there and do that. And then he picks Blake Brayley at 7.
Yeah.
And when I saw that, I thought, I actually think he'll do a decent job. He's a smart footballer, Blake, and it'd probably take a bit out of him in terms of the amount of work that he does in the middle third, and will freshen him up for when he goes back to 9 as well. But 44-0 going up there against the Titans side, let's not forget they've been probably one of the form teams over the competition the last month. So it's a massive statement and a great win from the Sharks.
Yeah, it felt like, boys, that it was a real line in the sand moment. Like, we've heard about Desi and his ambush. Well, they got well and truly ambushed last night, the Titans. The Sharks, I didn't give them a hope going up there as well. And we spoke about the guys that weren't playing. But, yeah, JD, like the messaging from the coach, to get the guys out there. Sometimes when you take the halves and you take the playmakers out of your game plan, it really simplifies things. And you could see that last night. I think sometimes the Sharks get caught, playing really laterally, and they can lose their way. There was no lateral aspect of their game last night. They were just kicking through. They were just going through the front door. They did an awesome job. And everyone's going to talk about the 44 points. But you got to think about their defence. The Titans at the back end of that first half had a lot of ball in good field position, and they have been breaking defences down. Now, the Titans weren't anywhere near the best that we've seen over the last couple of weeks. Last night, to be fair, they were a little bit off, and it doesn't take much at that level. But they still had 51% of possession for the whole game, and they completed at almost 90%. So I know that their contact was down. There was elements of their game that just wasn't up to standard or their usual standard. But there are other parts of the game that just would say that with a side like that, they're going to register some points and they're going to make a little bit of a contest out of it. So, and the Sharks just never let them. And it was their line speed, all the little parts of their game, all those parts that you work really hard on that not everyone else sees. Last night it was really obvious that they're starting to warm to something for the finals, because we've all seen what happened to them in the last couple of years where they've gone out in straight sets, they've had easy sort of runs in and they've got there and they've fallen over. But it just feels like after that performance, there's just something a little bit different about the Sharks this year.
Have you got them now in your top 4, Buzz?
Oh, yeah, I think they will. It's now a matter of playing the way they did last night, the manner in which they did. And look, again, I look at penalty counts all the time. The Titans won the penalties 12-5. That's not to say, Cronulla had because there were a couple of decisions there that probably the Titans could be questioning. But, look, I thought Jack Williams, his go forward, he made 183 metres for a front rower these days. When, the back 5 seemed to be the metre readers, he was outstanding. I like how Fitzy the week before just stood Tom Hazelton down for a week. He just thought he needed a recharge. Didn't send him to Newtown. Just gave him the week off, and then he came back and played really powerfully. And that's getting a side ready to play finals football. It's been horrible watching the Sharks in finals football. Fitzy hasn't won there yet, and that they're bounced out every year. But there was some good signs. I thought Carl Iro. Would you agree, mate? He's developing into a handy player, and
yeah, he's a player I looked at to bring in. He wasn't. I think he was on a development contract, or he was on train and trial when he first came to the Sharks. Actually, he wasn't even contracted long term to the Sharks. But credit to him, and through the system at Newtown, he's played some good footy, and he's got a great left foot step. He's an attacking player, and again, go back to Fitzy before he's put him in there, but he's backed him as well. He's given him time to find his feet at that level. He had a few defensive issues early, but he stuck with him, and he's looking really solid on that left edge, and he's a genuine threat. He's so hard to defend against, and he destroys the New South Wales Cup every time he plays on that left edge. So it's good to see him get an opportunity, and the statement is that it's not so much the nil, because you know they've been working on their defence, but without their first choice halves to register 44 points is massive. If they're a better side than Tom Hazelton coming on the charge, 5 off the try line under the post. I mean, he just does it time and time again. There's something about Tom Hazelton, isn't there, that every rugby league fan just loves him. Yep. I don't know if it's the old head or what it is, but he just, you look at him and just go, oh, man, you want to watch him come off the back fence.
Their halves did a great job yesterday, JD, no doubt. But, I mean, their middles, I don't think I've seen a more dominant middle in a contest where the speed of the play the ball and the momentum generated, like I would have loved to play in the halves in that contest last night. I mean, it was just so much space around the ruck. I mean, it's something that Desi really needs to have a look at, because they just lost their middle. They got absolutely annihilated in the middle third of the field last night, the Titans, and that just allowed those guys, and that was the opportunity, allowed those guys that don't usually play in that position so much time and space for their kicking game, for all of the little set pieces that they wanted to run. They all just made it look so easy because they were so dominant in the middle.
And I think over the last few weeks, or over the last 6 weeks, that's probably been the one area where they've been beaten up a little bit through that middle third in their middles. And I think it was a game against the Dolphins where Fitzy was quite critical of how they started the game and they got beaten through the ruck. So obviously the halves aren't there, so they've obviously had an intent. No, our middles, we need to stand up here. We need to own the middle third of the field and go after it. And they've got the bit between their teeth, got excited about it, and as you said, Goods, dominated the ruck. And that gave the young halves and the edges time to play.
For the Titans, it was a slow start, we know, for Desi and that team. And then, as you say, they've come through and have been one of the form sides over recent weeks, and that went out the window a bit. But as Kieran Foran said, the problem is now in terms of finals, which might have been an elusive dream anyway. Destiny has sort of been taken out of their hands, hasn't it? The numbers just say it.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem when you're chasing to make the 8. There's every game's a big game, and you can't stay up for 12, 13 rounds. And you might do it for 4 or 5 weeks, but there's going to be a week where you hit a flat spot. And obviously they started like that and they came up against the Sharks side who've been building towards this type of performance. But, yeah, it's why you need to bank the wins early. So you're not mentally exhausting yourself every week trying to win every game so that you can make finals. But they were a slight chance. I thought if they win this game, that really boosted them up. But they've still got some tough games to go. But again, I think it's more about the Sharks this win, because they needed to win to cement that top 4 or really put themselves in the top 4 chase.
You're talking about impossible tasks. Newcastle last year won 10 straight on the back of Ponga, who came at home and won the Dally M Award. Look, Des has said after the game they were beaten in the effort areas and they lacked intent, enthusiasm. And it was, they were really, really disappointing for a side that still had a little bit of hope left.
And they had the game the week before against the Broncos, which is a massive game for the Titans.
That's what I was going to say. And the game before that was against the Dolphins, so they've had 2, derbies back to back, and they were up for both of those contests. But I was going to ask you, JD, tough decision by Desi. You obviously got some really key players in that spine that are working well together. Brimson comes back in, and he needs to leave someone out, and I think he left Kelly out last night. Big call.
Yeah, and sometimes that disrupts the group.
Yeah,
it can, and he's a big time player from Brisbane, but he's been out a long time. And Brian Kelly's one of these tough, hard edge centres who I'm sure his teammates love playing with him. So, yeah, sometimes, making those decisions can cause a bit of, I wouldn't say disharmony, just a bit of disappointment maybe for that guy, which is sort of felt from his teammates. And, and I think Brimson played in the centres.
He did, yeah.
It's a difficult position to come back into when you've been out for a long time as well. And, that caused some problems for him in and around that area. But it's tough, though, because Brimson's so good for them. So you want to get him back. But Kenny's been outstanding, hasn't he?
Good.
Yeah,
what a player.
So good.
Yeah.
What a player. So, but it'll be interesting how that transfers now to the back end of the season in terms of what they do. You can't keep them all. They're all first graders and they all want to be playing in the positions they want to be playing in. And Campbell's in 6 now and Kenny looks to be in 1. Where does that leave Brimson? Is he happy to be a centre? There's some big decisions for the Titans in terms of those key players.
Expensive centre.
Very expensive, yeah.
And just signed long term too. About 5 or 6 years.